The sound of hurried footsteps echoed through the sterile hospital corridor, the kind of sound that always made hearts beat faster, not just for the patients but for the staff who had dedicated their lives to saving them. It was a stormy night, the rain lashing against the glass windows of St. Mary's Hospital in New York, and the emergency department was already overwhelmed. Inside, amidst the chaos of monitors beeping, gurneys being rushed, and voices calling out for medicines and scans, two people stood at the center of it all: Drive. Daniel Carter, a brilliant but emotionally scarred surgeon, and Nurse Emily Rivera, a compassionate yet resilient nurse whose presence often brought calm even in the most turbulent moments. Little did they know that tonight would test not only their medical skills but also the strength of their spirits, their beliefs, and their ability to fight against the odds for a single life that seemed to slip further and further away with every passing second. Emily had always believed that nursing was not just a profession but a calling. She had chosen this path after losing her younger brother to a condition that could have been treated if medical help had come sooner. For her, every patient was someone's brother, daughter, or parent, and she treated them with the same care she wished her brother had received. Daniel, on the other hand, had chosen surgery as a way to escape the pain of his past. Years ago, he had failed to save a patient who meant the world to him, his own mother. The guilt had shaped him into a man obsessed with perfection, brilliant in his work yet emotionally guarded. When he worked, he buried his emotions behind the precision of his scalpel, but deep down he carried the weight of every loss. That night, as the rain poured heavily, an ambulance screeched into the hospital's bay carrying a young man, barely 20, who had been in a terrible car accident. His body was battered, his pulse weak, and his breath shallow. Emily was the first to reach him, her gloved hand steady as she checked his vitals, her voice calm as she assured him though he was barely conscious. Daniel joined within moments, his sharp eyes scanning the situation with a mixture of urgency and control. "We need to get him to the OR, now," he said, his tone leaving no room for delay. The young man's name, they learned, was Michael, a college student whose parents were still on their way to the hospital, unaware that their son's life hung by a fragile thread. As they wheeled him into the operating room, the challenges began. The internal bleeding was severe, and the extent of his injuries was greater than they had anticipated. Every second mattered, and every decision could mean the difference between life and death. Emily worked tirelessly by Daniel's side, handing him instruments, monitoring Michael's vitals, and offering the kind of emotional strength that doctors often pretended they didn't need. But this was no ordinary surgery. Michael's heart stopped not once, but twice, and both times Daniel and Emily fought desperately to bring him back. Sweat dripped down their brows, the air thick with tension, as minutes stretched into hours. At one point, when Michael's heartbeat flatlined for the second time, a wave of silence filled the room. For a brief second, everyone's hope seemed to falter. Daniel's hands trembled slightly, memories of his mother's lifeless body flashing in his mind. He could hear his inner voice whispering, "Not again, not another life slipping away from you." But just then, Emily's firm voice cut through his thoughts. "Daniel, look at me. We are not giving up. Not tonight. This boy deserves a chance." Her eyes, filled with determination, anchored him back to reality. Taking a deep breath, Daniel refocused, and together they fought harder. The defibrillator paddles were placed, shocks delivered, and against the odds, Michael's heart began to beat again, faint but steady. The surgery stretched into the early hours of the morning. By the time they stabilized Michael, both Daniel and Emily were physically exhausted, their gloves stained, their bodies aching, but their spirits unwilling to surrender. As they stepped out of the operating room, they were greeted by Michael's parents, who had finally arrived. The look in their eyes, a mixture of fear, hope, and desperation, was a reminder of why they had chosen this path. Emily gently explained the situation, her voice soft yet honest, while Daniel reassured them that although the road ahead would be long and uncertain, their son had been given a fighting chance. The parents broke down in tears, thanking them both, and in that moment, the weight of their efforts felt worthwhile. But the journey was far from over. Saving a life inside the operating room was one battle, keeping that life alive in the days that followed was another. Michael remained in critical condition in the ICU, and every day brought new challenges. His lungs struggled, his blood pressure dropped without warning, and infections threatened to undo everything they had fought for. Daniel spent countless hours monitoring him, often skipping meals and ignoring his own health, while Emily stayed by Michael's side, speaking to him even when he was unconscious, believing that somewhere deep inside he could hear her words. She read him stories, played soft music, and reminded him that he wasn't alone. Amid these struggles, Daniel and Emily began to see sides of each other they hadn't noticed before. Daniel, the stoic surgeon who rarely let emotions surface, found himself moved by Emily's unwavering compassion. She had a way of reminding everyone, including him, that medicine wasn't just about procedures and diagnoses but about humanity. Emily, in turn, saw the vulnerability Daniel tried so hard to hide. Behind his sharp commands and long hours was a man haunted by his past, yet unwilling to stop fighting for others. Slowly, an unspoken bond grew between them, built not on romance at first, but on shared pain, hope, and the silent understanding that they needed each other more than they realized. The biggest test came one evening when Michael's condition suddenly deteriorated. His organs began to shut down, and the medical team debated whether continuing aggressive treatment was even worth it. Daniel, exhausted and shaken, felt the familiar fear of losing another patient. He argued with himself, wondering if prolonging the fight was crueler than letting go. But Emily stood firm. She reminded Daniel of Michael's parents, of the dreams the young man still held, and of the fact that miracles did happen, not because doctors created them, but because they refused to stop believing in them. Daniel, she said quietly but firmly, this isn't about us. It's about him. As long as there's a chance, no matter how small, we fight. That's why we're here. Those words reignited Daniel's fire. Together, they launched an all-out effort, adjusting medications, performing emergency interventions, and staying by Michael's side through the longest night of their lives. Every beep of the monitor felt like a battle won, every sigh of breath a small victory. Finally, as dawn broke, Michael's condition stabilized. It was fragile, but it was real. They had pulled him back from the edge once again. Weeks passed, and slowly Michael began to recover. His eyes opened, weak but alive, and the first thing he saw was Emily smiling at him, whispering, "Welcome back, Michael." Tears welled in his parents' eyes as they embraced their son, thanking Daniel. And Emily for not giving up when it would have been easier to let go. For Daniel, the moment was more than just a victory, it was redemption. For the first time since his mother's death, he felt that he had truly honored her memory by fighting for someone else's life. For Emily, it was proof that compassion and perseverance could change destinies. The experience left both Daniel and Emily forever changed. Their bond deepened into a friendship that carried traces of something more, a quiet, tender connection born out of shared struggle and victory. They knew that the hospital would continue to bring them countless challenges, heartbreaks, and difficult choices, but they also knew that as long as they faced them together, they could withstand anything. Years later, Michael would return to the hospital, not as a patient but as a volunteer, inspired by the doctor and nurse who had saved his life. He often told others, "They didn't just save me. They taught me what it means to fight for someone you love." His words became a reminder of the ripple effect one act of courage could create. And so, in the bustling heart of St. Mary's Hospital, where lives hung in delicate balance every day, the story of a doctor and a nurse stood as a testament to the power of resilience, teamwork, and hope. It wasn't just about saving one life. It was about proving that in a world filled with uncertainty, the human spirit, when fueled by compassion and determination, could overcome even the darkest nights. The journey to save Michael's life was not just his story, it was Daniel's redemption, Emily's triumph, and a beacon for anyone who had ever felt the weight of despair. And though hospitals would always echo with both tears and laughter, victories and losses, there would always be heroes in white coats and scrubs who refused to stop fighting, reminding the world that sometimes, saving one life means saving countless others.